Good morning, everybody. This is Lindsay Van Paris with GHD. I just want to welcome you all to the webinar. We've got 2 more minutes to spare. If you have any questions or having any issues, please use the chat box, but we'll get started right around 11.
Hey, Lindsay, I'm trying to find my chat box. I don't know where the heck it went. There it is.
Right, Phil, it looks like we're still getting a few people joining in. Do you want to wait 1 more minute before we get started?
Sure, I'll wait another minute. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Phil Rust. I'm chair of the Roundabout Committee for ITE. Sorry we had to reschedule this. We found out we were on a platform that could only a few people could join in, so I couldn't be replayed later. So now we're in a much better situation. So as most of you on here know, roundabouts can handle about the same amount of traffic signals can, but with half the crashes and a quarter of the injuries, also eliminating 80% of fatal and severe injuries. And also some of them look pretty good. I guess that's a subjective measure, but many agencies are starting to use intersection control evaluations to compare options. And most of them are showing that roundabouts are well worth the additional cost to build them. Unfortunately, on a fixed budget, that additional cost reduces the number of intersections that could be approved each year, and that can be a difficult trade-off to make. So as the cost of roundabouts drops to near or even below the cost of a traffic signal, we're starting to see more and more creative excuses for choosing that signal. So the way I see it, it's only a matter of time, really. Almost all new intersections eventually will start to become roundabouts. So, Lindsay, if you want to go to the next slide. I just wanted to thank Lee Rodigers with Kittleson & Associates for creating this chart for the TRB Roundabout Conference every 3 years. And also to many of you online here who are providing the information that he uses to make this up. You can see the accelerating trend. And of course, once that cost reaches parity with the traffic signal, I think we're going to see it explode even further. So our goal with the Affordable Roundabout series webinars that we're doing here is just to show how close roundabouts are to being as affordable as traffic signals, and of course to share those cost-cutting ideas that don't compromise performance. So to celebrate advancement towards that goal, we're offering an annual award for the most affordable roundabout, with the winner to be announced in New Orleans next year. In order to win, the cost of your roundabout divided by the cost of a typical traffic signal must be lower than everyone else's. So the cost of a representative traffic signal at your agency must include roadway and turn pocket reconstruction, just to make it fair. The application form for this award will be posted on ITE's Roundabout website pretty soon. And now I'd like to introduce Lindsay Van Paris with GHD, who is leading the Affordable Roundabout Speaker Series. Lindsay?
Thank you, Phil. A couple housekeeping notes. You all are in listen-only mode, but we are welcoming and encourage you to ask questions. So if a question pops up as the presentation go on, please use the question pod to type your questions, and then we'll answer them at the end. If we do not have time to answer all the questions, we will post the responses and the questions and answers on the ITE Roundabout community page. Our speaker today is Mark McCulloch with Washtenaw County Road Commission. He has offered to make his slides available for us, so we will also post that in addition to the recording of this webinar on our community, or the Roundabout community page as well. So look for that next week, and you can share and get the word out about affordable roundabouts for us as well. If you have a roundabout that you think would be a good contender for the Affordable Roundabout series, please reach out to me. At the end of Mark's presentation, my contact information will be posted. I will also post my email in the chat, and we can talk about when you can present to the group and how you go about submitting for the award. So our speaker, Mark, is a 20-year veteran of the Washtenaw County Road Commission. He has been involved in the design and construction of 11 roundabouts dating back to 2006. Mark has created a countrywide roundabout survey that led to the discovery that public education in navigating roundabouts was lacking. This realization resulted in a nationally recognized local education program to create partnerships with leverage groups. Mark is also a leader in the new trend of right-sizing roundabouts to save more lives at intersections while stretching limited resources for other uses. Mark now oversees the permit section of the Road Commission, but still dabbles in design and construction matters. Mark graduated from Michigan State University with a BS in civil engineering. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate everyone. I'm going to do some clicking here on my end. Lindsay, can you see my screen? Which screen do you see?
I see the right one.
The right one. All right, excellent. Well, thank you. I appreciate ITE inviting me to speak to all of you. I heard through the grapevine there was about 458 different computers logged in across the country, so really exciting. Hope you feel like you get some value out of this presentation. And really what I'm excited to share with you is how the Washtenaw County Road Commission has started a new trend. We didn't create it, but we are participating on the bleeding edge, I like to call, on right-sizing roundabouts. So outline for today I gotta do a click here. Let's see. Hold on, technical difficulties. I don't know why it's not working all of a sudden. Let me look at the different screens. Sorry, guys. We had this all worked out, and then I clicked on some stuff. Darn it. There we go. Now, here we go. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, so we're outline for today. Pontiac Trail, it's 7 mile. That's where the story begins. Then we have a leap of faith. That's where we built our first true mini roundabout. That's 90 feet in ICD on a Textile road. They were back to back. And then last fall we did Moon and Bemis, which I like to call the new frontier, potentially a new frontier mini roundabouts, and some lessons that I've learned. A little bit of background information on Washtenaw County. We're right next to the Wayne County, which holds Detroit. Not technically a suburb of Detroit, but we're pretty close. And we have a population of 367,000 people, 722 square miles, median age 33, because we have the University of Michigan. Ann Arbor's the county seat. We have a mix of rural and county and urban in our county. It's almost half 50-50. So it's kind of a unique county where we've got the best of both worlds here. We have about 65 always stop controlled intersections, so that kind of tells you what kind of congestion we have. That's primarily in and around the Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti area. So why do we build roundabouts? Well, Phil kind of alluded to this in the beginning. We have your safety, and we all know about the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety, what stats they provided dating back well over a decade on what benefits roundabouts have to offer the community. Improved efficiency, and not always, but in many cases, roundabouts can streamline traffic through an intersection better than a traffic signal can. Can be better for the environment with fewer emissions into the atmosphere from idling vehicles. You have opportunities for enhancement within the center island. But all this can come at a cost. People like to say roundabouts are always cheaper than a traffic signal, and that's frankly just not true. It all depends on circumstances. And the traditional roundabout, depending on who you ask, plus or minus $1 million. I mean, I talked to a gentleman from Connecticut, and he said it was $2.3 million to build one out there for a single lane. He can't even look at it. And that's for everything, design, construction. So it can really be detrimental to a budget. So where the story begins, Pontiac Trail and 7 Mile. You see below the county, I've got 20 townships in Washtenaw County. The upper northeast township, Salem Township, is where Pontiac Trail and 7 Mile is. It's an always stop controlled intersection. In 2014, we plan to build a traditional size roundabout there, ICD about 140. You can see the party store that is on the right corner there. They weren't so much problematic as, ironically, was the west side of the road, which is the left side, where you see that open area. That's commercially zoned property, and the gentleman that owns both those quadrants there on the northwest and southwest corners wants to build some commercial stuff down the road. So that's not cheap land. Here's the footprint that we had. ADT Pontiac Trail is the road that goes north and south, up and down on your screen, 7,600 vehicles per day. 7 Mile going from east to west, left to right, 4,600. Design speed was 55 miles an hour. Trucks it's a bedroom community, Pontiac Trail is, so meaning it's a route for bedroom community from South Line to Ann Arbor. So all the traffic comes south, so from top to bottom in the AM and the PM. It's going from bottom to top to get back to South Lyon. They're going to leave their jobs in Ann Arbor. The estimated project cost was $900,000. We had a CMAQ grant to reduce emissions out there. The problem that we ran into, though, as you can see from the square footage on this per quadrant, the party store really wasn't problematic. I was anticipating problems. So I told my designer, I said, hey, here's the limits of your sandbox. And you really need to stay away from that party store. And they did. They did a great job. I mean, I'm not going to do a total take on a party store. That would be very expensive. So that meant we ultimately went to the west. Well, ultimately, when the appraisal came in, our appraisal exceeded $100,000, and we were not anticipating the appraisal to come in that much. The property owner was demanding $300,000. Bottom line is we were not in any position to come close to a number that they would agree to for us to have right of entry to be able to go forward through the MDOT bidding, Michigan Department of Transportation bidding process. So we ultimately had to cancel the project, return the funds, and to this day, the intersection still sits as an always stop control, which is too bad, because it's the #1 highest priority intersection for congestion, and to this date, it's still the same way. 6 months later, my bosses came to me on a project called Textile Road, and they said, "Hey, Mark, what do you want to do? Traffic signal a roundabout again?" And Pontiac Trail and 7 Mile was in my mind, and I thought to myself, are we going to go down this potential same path where we're going to have to eat up a lot of cost and maybe have to return money, and this is going to be problematic? Or do we think of something new? Do we live outside the box? And I remember a presentation from Wei Zhang. Wei, you're out there, hello, about mini roundabouts. And I thought to myself, hey, can we do a mini here? And ultimately, I proposed that to my bosses. They all looked at me like I had a third eye on my forehead in 2014. And ultimately, they gave me time to investigate. Called up Wei Zhang, said, hey, I have a proposal for you. He looked at it. He said, yes, this is going to be a beautiful proposal. This is going to work and work well for your intersection in Ypsilanti Township. So here's the layout of what it was. The Textile Road goes from across your screen, left to right. And then Stony Creek is on the angle. And Hitchingham is the north-south road from bottom to top. We had high-speed approaches. We're talking 55, 50-mile-per-hour design speeds on these. There's a charter school that existed on Hitchingham Road to the south. So both of these intersections on the south side of the triangle, not the north, those are always stop-controlled intersections. And it backed up to the point where it took 30 minutes just to get from one side of the intersection to the other when you got through the queue. So it was a major problem. And then Interstate 94 is to the north of here. So whenever there was a traffic closure on that, people would alternately use Textile Road to get around that. So it can become problematic throughout the year. And this is ultimately the mini design that we came up with. ICDs was 90 feet. ADTs with Textile, again, that's from left to right, 6,600. Hitchingham, which is the one to the right, 68. Stony Creek on the angle, 4,200. So I misspoke. Design speed, 45 to 55 miles an hour. Truck traffic, pretty small. Each roundabout, this is the big takeaway right here, 1 or 2, was $400,000. That's pretty remarkable. That was to build it for a bid price. So $800,000 total to provide 2 roundabouts, and for a traditional roundabout, like I said, plus or minus $1 million to do one. Now here's the big takeaway I'd like you to take a look at. Slivers of land and not chunks. Recall from the Pontiac Trail and 7 Mile how I needed quite a bit of square footage to be able to build that roundabout with an ICD of 140. And in this case, my total acquisition costs to secure easements or grading permits, temporary grading permits, was $3,757. So what does that translate into? Well, it means you have more money to build more improvements, purchase more equipment, do whatever your needs are. The pie is the pie. We all know the resources never get bigger. They only shrink with inflation over time, but our needs never go down. So by building this smaller size roundabout, what we found is that we can build them faster, we can design them quicker, we can get the right-of-way quicker, and they don't cost as much. These are all wins, and they're less intrusive to the property owners that are directly adjacent to the roundabout. They do break, meaning if you have an ADT, this is about the way Zhang told me this, about 15,000 or greater, they will break. So you don't want to put these in at, say, a 25,000 ADT intersection. They shouldn't be placed everywhere, so you got to make sure you put them at the right spots. Here in Washtenaw County, we only like to put them in right now on all-way stop control. Why is that important? Because they're conditioned to stop on all the legs during construction. If you only had side street stop, you could, on the free flow movement where all of a sudden they had to stop and it wasn't expected, create a problem once the project is open. So right now we're a little leery to do anything other than always stop controls. But as you saw from one of my earlier slides, I got 65 of those intersections across the county, so I have no shortages of places to place mini roundabouts. All right. That's not the focus of this presentation, so I don't have many slides on that. That was just kind of the big one, and ultimately it turned out great, a big success. People liked it. It worked. The congestion that took 30 minutes to get through was less than a minute, and we built more and more to the point where Moon and Bemis was which we're going to focus on right now, was my 7th mini roundabout, and I should preference mini. When I say mini, I mean technically, I mean compact urban, which is in the range of 90 to 100, 110 at the outer limits, to minis, which are under 90. So I built compact urbans for commercial routes, and I built minis. Well, but fast forward now from 2015, when Textile Road was built, to last fall, my board gave us allotted $300,000 for an intersection improvement. Staff, you figure out how to deal with it. We're not going to micromanage you. So, management came to me and they said, Mark, what are we going to do for 300? And I said, well, you're certainly not going to build a traffic signal with the left turn lane, because that's not going to work. You don't have the budget for that. And 300,000 was going to be kind of tight, challenging just for a roundabout, because the last project I showed you at Textile Road was 400,000, give or take. So I had a challenge, and it was a challenge accepted. That's what I had to work with. So in 2017, we had, when this was, again, an always stop control intersection, there was a death at this intersection, July 2nd, where one motorist just flew through a stop sign, hit another one, and there was a fatality there, very tragic. So our project goals, we want to enhance the safety. I live about a mile from this intersection, so I monitor it multiple times a day. It'll limit, and that's not the reason why we chose it, it just happened to be that way. Eliminate peak hour delay. It takes 15, 20 minutes to get through this intersection when it was an always stop control at the AM, PM peak, depending upon the direction, because it was a feeder to a campus, Saline campus schools. Because I only had a $300,000 budget and not a lot of time to build this, my goal was to acquire no permanent right of way. I needed grading permits, but I didn't want to have any permanent right of way needs. I wanted to use the lowest possible cost using curb and gutter, because if you don't use curb and gutter, it's hard to retain people from when they're turning corners. I had to accommodate truck traffic. This is Bemis Road, as you'll see in a minute here, is commercially route from east to west. And I'd have to do that using movements over the center island. I'm presuming that you all know on many roundabouts, the central island is designed so that truck traffic can maneuver left over them. But here in Washtenaw, you can build them flush. The Textile ones I did in the previous slides, that was a flush center island. Since then, I've raised it 3 inches, and that's enough to discourage motorists from driving over there, but the trucks and farm equipment can. This was my inspiration. Brian Walsh, if you're listening out there, howdy. This was at I-5 in Slater, Washington DOT. And you can see at this one, it's in the realm, like 85 feet ICD off of an interstate ramp to which connects Seattle to Vancouver. I thought to myself, wow, if he can do this, I can do this. You can see in this case, he built this, in my understanding, in 3 days. You can see he used the blocks to push traffic out to get the deflection there. That's great. I mean, he had less than $100,000 budget to do this, and it works. I wanted something a little bit more permanent than this. So, but I use that as my inspiration. So here's the special considerations. You can see I got 2 WB62s going through there. In fact, they may even be 67s. That's something I have to deal with. This is probably a less than 1% scenario. I happened to drive home, and there it was. I was kind of like, ooh, grab the camera, take a look. It's the one and only time I've ever seen two trucks head to head like that, but hey, it exists. It means it happens. So fortunately, I was able to see that. Here's some design details. So design speed. So Bemis Road, it's not labeled on here. My apologies. It's just a screenshot. Bemis Road goes from left to right on your screen. Moon Road goes from south to north. So we got 50 miles an hour on Moon, so that's the bottom to the top, and Bemis 55. ADTs are pretty much uniform, which is a good thing for left turn movements. 3% trucks. The ICD, in order, you can see the orange line is my right-of-way. In order to get that fit within the right-of-way without any permanent takes, that was it, 82 feet. So I was really pressing the boundary on this one. Splitter island lengths, normally they're in the realm of 250 feet. So these shrunk them down to 75 foot in length. Diameter of the central island is 40 feet, and I only went, give or take, 240 feet in each direction from the center of the intersection for construction. So let's talk about the construction means and methods. In order to keep this thing on budget, I don't have a budget to dig away, haul away, and put new in. So I wanted to utilize the material that was there. So I crushed and shaped it, pulverized the road with the pulverizer. So I got that asphalt down to granulars, you can see in my hand there on the right. So once that's done, we grade it, we shape it. Underground, this is another thing, piping. Underground piping can be very expensive, and I needed to limit that. Ideally, I'd like to have none at all, but that just wasn't realistic in order to get water from point A to point B. In the northeast corner there, the water held year round. It wasn't going anywhere, so I had to get rid of it somehow, and the only outlet I had was to the south. So I limited my piping, but the more you can do just with curb and gutter and spillways, the cheaper your design's going to be. So that's something you want to reflect upon when you design an affordable roundabout. So we're rough grading the splitter islands here. You can see the grade stakes that represent the island. They're basically getting things ready for cutting it down to a grade for asphalt. Well, actually, no, excuse me. They're putting in for curb and gutter. The grade is to the left and to the right, as you can see what it's going to be. For placement of asphalt, you see on the outer edges where it's grayish, that's limestone. That's where ultimately I had the outer edges of my roundabout that extended beyond the existing footprint of the roadway. So that I did cut down to clay grade, put in a proper amount of stone, and match that up to the millings that I had. You can see here shaping for the center island. Again, trenching out for curb and gutter. Time to pour the concrete, so we got everything formed. These islands are roughly 3 inches. We did them in 2 pours. For those of you in the Michigan area, this is MDOT B2 curb and gutter. And then we just filled in concrete in the center after it was poured, once we got a 3-day break on it. So when it can be challenging to pave any type of roundabout, frankly, but these mini roundabouts, it can be even really more problematic. So it's really important that you sit down with your paving contractor and you talk over your options as far as what you can and can't do, where you want your joints, where you want your seams, how you want to make your pulls, where your trucks are going to come from in and out of the site. Do you have any no truck routes? I mean, these are all types of things. Do you have any overhead utilities that are in the way? So you can see how they're getting asphalt in the hopper. He's just got a little John Deere tractor there with a front end loader, and he takes that up to the back of the hopper of the flow boy, gets his bucket filled, and just goes back and forth, and it just keeps moving. That's how you pave the mini roundabout, because there's no way you can get the flow boy through that intersection. And it's still even difficult to get a single unit truck in there as well. Placement of circulating arrows. Lindsay asked me about this one when I first introduced myself to her last year. I took this directly from the UK when I did the first Mini Roundabout, I wanted to have that arrow that curves on it. And the story behind that one is it didn't exist. The contractor, this is a job downstream, so they got the hang of it by then. But they kept on trying to draw it up with chalk, and I kept, guys, where's your template? And they didn't have one. Ironically, I was moving that day, so I was kind of going back and forth between the job site and my wife at home. And 3 hours later, I came back, and they're still struggling with it. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Guys, just wait here. Grab some boxes at home. We carved it up, and they made this template, and they just kept it because they knew they were going to need it again. And they just make it with cold plastic, and it turns out really slick. So this is the final product of Moon and Bemis. It took roughly, we started right after Labor Day, the day after Labor Day we started. There was, in Michigan, a work stoppage that did affect us somewhat. Long drawn out story, don't want to get into that, but ultimately we couldn't do any work for 2 weeks due to union contracts being locked out. So it was really problematic statewide. Pushed schedules to the limit on the back end, and we were able to finish right around November 6th. So, I mean, all things considered, it worked out pretty well. Probably could have finished this job 2 weeks earlier had we had the plans, had the work stoppage not, the lockout not occur. So we took some drone footage, and you can see here, this is about 1:45. Sight distance is pretty good. How I measure that is, Mark Lenter's told me, hey, in the UK, what we end up doing is the minimum you want to achieve. You go back 50 feet from each stop bar, and you look, yield line, and you look to your left. And if you can see your target from 50 foot out in the UK, that's what works. And we achieve that in all directions because, frankly, the Washtenaw manual doesn't give us any guidance when it comes to an all-way yield-controlled intersection. So we wanted to provide something, but we weren't going to be able to provide, 230 feet, give or take, of what it would be on side street yield conditions. So I'll let this video run, see if anything. You can see tread marks on the center island there, from vehicles, trucks going up and over on it. That's not problematic. I use those optical speed bars to help try to, get the driver's attention as they're driving through the intersection. I have 4 street lights for traffic at night on each corner there. Utilities, I had some utilities I had to move. Fortunately, in Michigan, the utility company has to move at their expense if it's in the road right away. So that was not a cost I had to take into consideration. You notice on the right side, there's that triangle area with the mat. That was a berm that was there, an earth berm. The lady is very meticulous about her lawn. Her dad put that there years ago, and she hated it. And I needed a grading permit. I didn't need that much land. But she basically said, hey, if you make this go away, I'll give you a grading permit. And I said, deal. So that's why that area goes out that far. I didn't need it. It was just kind of a bargaining chip I used in order to get what I wanted. On the left side, you can see the property there. He has those trees in front of his house. Those are all located outside the right-of-way. He was adamant, I do not, A, want this project, B, I don't want the lights on my house, so I'm not willing for those trees to come down. So ideally, it would be nice to have greater sight distance, but it is what it is. I got enough to make it work. Here's a picture I took at night. You can still see the leaves on the tree. It was kind of still a warm fall. Really good illumination for 4 street lights, LED lights. It turned out really nice. I was very pleased with it. Got really super excited one night at midnight. Fog rolled in. I'm like, whoa. I ran out because I live a mile from this intersection and took a look at it. And you can see it's good. I mean, that street lighting really illuminates that intersection very well, in my opinion, for fog. That was pretty dense fog that night. I think there was like less than a quarter mile visibility. So that was good to show that this is safe in those types of conditions, in my opinion. So snow plows and snows, actually just snow WB62. One of the things here in Michigan is we have, we don't have as much snow as we do on the west side of the state near Grand Rapids from lake effect, but we do get it. And, truck drivers are not fans of these. I'll just be candid. I talked to a few of them as I start the video here. But it works. They do learn how to use this. You're going to see two trucks moving. Ironically, it just happened to work out. You'll see one coming over from the right. So we got a 62 coming through here in the snow. Handles it just fine, no problems. Doesn't give me the finger, so that's good. And then you'll see a box truck coming up here. He is going to go up and over, not fully, but just enough here to make his left turn. No, I did not stage that, so that was pretty ironic. But here we were getting about 10 inches of snow that day. It was in the middle of a snowstorm, and it shows me that this works. And that direction that that truck is going to an industrial plaza. So I do get trucks along that movement. I don't really get them turning left. They just go through the intersection for the most part. And here you can see, evidence of trucks going up and over the center island there for overtracking. So school bus. I've seen buses go in every direction here. This is a dash cam that I had set up in my vehicle. And I was staking out videos one day trying to get this. You're going to notice that the school bus does, like that box truck, go up and over the end, driver's side rear axle, go over that. I asked the drivers, I asked the school superintendent, hey, are any of your drivers having any problems with this? Do they dislike it? And the answer is no. Not one person, not one driver has complained to the transportation director that that's a problem, or it's too tight, or they feel unsafe. All the drivers have said to them, it's fine, it works, we understand why it's small, yeah, bigger would be better, but we get it and we can live with it. So that's something that, understanding that you're not going to be able to do a full, with an ICD of 82, be able to do a full 90-degree turn without having to clip that center island. So snowplow, winter maintenance, that's something else that comes up with DPW. How's my plow going to get in here? Well, a little story behind this. So this is staged. I had this worked out timing-wise. I thought the wheelbase of my truck was, the steering angle of the truck was not the same of what basically, I had the wrong steering column put in for auto turn. What you're going to notice here is he can't always make a full turn, 360-degree turn. Is that problematic? I say no. They don't think it's problematic. It's just not ideal, of course. One of the things I guess is a lesson learned here is that keep in mind, don't make assumptions, double check all your variables when you're doing auto turn, because I learned that the steering that we put in for auto turn was not reality of what it is on our double axle trucks here. He's going to make one more backup. That driver is a 20-year vet, actually more than that, 25-year vet, so he is not a rookie. He says there are days he can do a full 360 on that without clipping the corners. His words to me were, if it were 5 feet larger in diameter, I would have no problem with it whatsoever. So, I guess it's one of those things where it's not a silver bullet. Bigger would be better. Someone asked me in a presentation last week, Mark, what's your opinion of the ideal roundabout size? And my answer is 100 to 110 feet. That's really the ideal. But you don't always have the money or the layout for it. And so this is an alternative, is what you could use to still, as you can see, we plow it, we get through it. That's not a small truck. That's not a toy truck that gets through there, and it solves it. Here's the bottom line. So I had $300,000 in the budget to pay a contractor, and you can see on the bottom there, $673.63. So did it pretty well. Design. It was a hybrid. Hubbell, and Clark helped me with Mark Lenters. They were both. Mark Lenters did the full footprint of Orston Roundabout engineers, and then I had Hubbell, and Clark helped me with a couple sheets for the plan profile, and I took care of everything else with the proposal and the estimate and detour routes, payment marketing plans, that kind of stuff. Survey with topo and construction staking, 12 and change. Right away was a little bit more expensive than the textile one. It just happened to be a few more property owners needed some more time to think things over, multiple visits. So but in grand scheme of things, $1,000 more 3 years later, that's not a big deal whatsoever. Street lights, just under a little over $11,000. That includes maintenance, so they take care of that. Yes, one of the lights was clipped by a truck since we opened in November, and then 24 hours that light was back up. So that light post is located within the road right of way. Ideally, it'd be nicer to put it back further, but you know, that's all the room I had to work with. Construction engineering, so you got your inspection, material testing, your office technicians, checking your paperwork, so you're under 42 grand there. So for a grand total of $404,306 from first pen to paper and to paying a contractor, I say that's pretty darn good, and it's hard to build. You definitely be challenged to have any type of a robust permanent design. We could always do temporary designs for cheaper, but something that's long lasting with curb and gutter, that's pretty remarkable if you ask me, and it's a lot of bang for your buck. Crashes. So what happens with the mini roundabout? Like I said, I think I've got 7 mini roundabouts / compact urbans going back to 2015. And the one thing I want to caution everyone on, we have PDOs, where they're predominantly all failure yields with some rear ends. I am statistically showing for a 90-footer, I'm trending 12 to 15 PDOs per year. If you do not have the stomach for that with your politicians, your constituents, your community, this ain't for you. I'll just be candid with you. It's not something you're gonna get away from. Why is that? Presumably, I think it's because there is basically a second to 2 seconds less of decision-making time with the tighter circular roadway for a driver to determine a gap in order to make the roundabout. Is that a bad or obviously it's not a great thing? Is it acceptable? When you look at all of your considerations with your environment, with your capacity, with the fact that people aren't getting hurt, we say yes here in Washtenaw. We think that's a fair trade-off to make because we just don't have the money to continue building big roundabouts. We have to build them where we need them from an ADT standpoint, but if we have them under and it's an all-way stop control where they're conditioned to stop previously, we feel it's an acceptable trade-off. But I think that's fair warning for you all out there that you should know that. Lessons learned. So immediately on day one, yeah, I started getting overtracking, and I got overtracking in all 4 quadrants. Shocking? No. I was a little bit optimistic that it wasn't going to be this prevalent, this bad. So what I ended up doing after the fact, I got the contractor back out there. This is all built into my price of that $300,000, where I cut out 3 foot wide, 12 inches deep, and I put stone back there. Now, one of the things you may ask is, hey, Mark, why didn't you put concrete in? Well, A, time of year wasn't great. B, you should recall in one of my previous slides, the right-of-way was pretty, the corner was pretty close to the back of that curb. I didn't want to put a permanent feature outside of the road right-of-way. I didn't want to have to negotiate with the property owners after the fact. The grass is going to grow through that stone eventually. And I thought to myself, this will work. And it's still working to this day. The property owners don't have any, they haven't called me and complained about it. So I think it was a good trade-off after the fact in order to fix that. And we're not getting any more overtracking problems. You can see the scarring from the truck traffic on the curb and gutter, but that's going to happen when you have the tighter radius. I mean, when you're in a tight urban environment in the city, you're going to get that anyways. So now this one took me by surprise. I didn't think about this one. Choosing your design vehicle. I was out here that day with that GoPro camera. I probably took 75 video shots that day. And the one thing I noticed was with the ready-mix concrete trucks was here in Michigan, I know some states may have 4. We got 5 rigid axles here in Michigan. That truck has a difficult time turning left in these tight situations. That was no surprise to me. But what I wasn't expecting is I knew they were going to off-track on the center island, but what I found also was they were off-tracking on the passenger rear side, passenger front side on the outside radius. Not by much, but more than I liked. So that's something, a feature. Had I not been out there taking video, I probably would have never caught that. So that's something you want to take into consideration when you're doing these tight mini roundabouts is put a ready mix truck through there. Take a look at it. and see, you know, it's not going to be your design vehicle, but at the same time, you want to see, maybe it is your design vehicle. I shouldn't say that. You don't know the situation, but every location is unique. But keep that in mind, because there's enough traffic on here where I think, you know, if I built just a hair bigger, it probably would have been more beneficial. So placements of pylons for winter maintenance. You can see originally I have the yellow ones that are put a couple feet back. That snowplow driver I was telling you about, Mike, and the veteran, he was telling me those things are less than helpful. You know, here I am trying to do a good thing for him. He's like, yeah, they're too far back. So I ended up going to my garage. I got the yellow stick, the orange sticks out of my garage and pounding them in the fabric where the joint between the two pores. And he said that was more helpful. It gave him more of an idea where it was. So, from here on, for now, I'll just go out there every winter and plug them back in. They stayed most of the winter. Trucks didn't knock them over. So, something to keep in mind where you place those pylons. You're going to want to make sure that you put them in a spot that's going to be helpful. So talk to your DPW guys. Building upon our success, so you can see over on the right the locations that I've got dating back to 2015 and the ICDs that I've got, and we have plans to build 4 more roundabouts here in Washtenaw County. Some bigger than others. Some are 100, some are 90. But the point is that here in Washtenaw, we have people telling us build more. These are great. We understand they're small. Ironically, I got a little bit of time here. So on what I call the group gossip Facebook page in Washtenaw County in the area where this roundabout resides, you'll get some people after there's a fender bender and they'll say it's too small. And ironically, people that I don't even know come out and say it's not the roundabout, it's the people. They don't yield. It's not the roundabout's fault that some of these crashes are happening. What does this mean in twofold? Well, one, I think it means that we, as Lindsay pointed out in my bio, we need to do a better job with education out there, folks. It's something that we have presumed over time that people just understood how to work roundabouts. And the fact of the matter is they don't. We just keep building them. And it's been a disservice, frankly, when I look back upon how we've done things for years nationally, not just here in Washtenaw, how we don't engage with the community a little bit better, engage leverage groups to help carry our water to explain how roundabouts work. Letty, I know you're out there, Letty Shamp with Hilliard, Ohio. She's done a phenomenal job with her education campaign in Ohio. She is a role model we should all strive to become to help people understand how to use them. Because in time, I'm optimistic that when the first traffic signal was built 80 years ago, 100 years ago, people didn't know what red and green meant. They had to be educated, and motor clubs was the leverage group to help educate people how to use that. And I think that's lacking today. So basically, bottom line is we're continuing to do more with less. That's what legislators, that's what constituents, the driving public demands. No one wants to pay more in taxes. We all understand that. But, they want us to do more. And this isn't a great example of how you can deliver on that. And it's not a silver bullet. It's not perfect. They don't belong everywhere. But when you factor in all the equations, we feel that we got a really good thing going here. So we can do more to save more lives so that fatality at that always stop controlled intersection and other places are limited. We'll never get rid of them altogether across the county, of course, but every chance we get to make one intersection better is a major success story. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Lindsay. She could ask questions, and from there I can answer one by one as I can.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you to everyone who took the time to submit a question. We've got quite a few, so we'll go through as many as we can. There are some questions that we went ahead and responded to in the group, so if you answered a question, we may have answered it in the group while Mark was presenting on some of the housekeeping items. But the first question is, the time saving from 30-minute queue to 1 minute is part of the cost picture of Mark's Mini. The time delay has a cost figure that could be, this is more of a comment. So the comment was, the time savings from the 30-minute queue to 1 minute is part of the cost picture of Mark's Mini. The time delay has cost figure that can be entered into the BCA spreadsheet from Modern Roundabouts.
Sure. I mean, and that's just, I agree with that statement. When we work here in government, for the most part, we take snapshots of our quarterly budget. So that's kind of the reality I have to work within. But yes, there are real savings. So people's time matters. That is a cost. And that is above and beyond any of the numbers that I've shown.
Right. It's the soft cost versus the hard cost, right? There's savings in emergency response times and collision responses and all of that, which really make roundabouts more affordable.
And let me just add, very important, that you want your school districts, you want your fire chiefs, you want your police officers, you want them on your team. You don't want to jam this stuff down their throats. And at first there might be a little bit of animosity, a little trepidation, but ultimately how I try to get into the wheelhouse of any type of emergency professional that's out there that's not a big fan of roundabouts because they say that it's going to slow them down. I tell them that you're the first people that arrive on these sites, guys. You're the ones that are putting them in an ambulance. You're the ones that are saving their lives when it counts. And by putting these roundabouts in, yes, it's a trade-off. Maybe you get a few more seconds, and I'm not trivializing, seconds do matter. But there is also benefit for them because they are the first ones to respond to these intersections. And I think sometimes they forget they're all about the time, which I get. But I think they lose focus about the real stats that happen at some of these intersections that aren't roundabouts. So with that, just do your best to get them on your side of the table because you want them to promote these.
Mm-hmm. And if you are an agency that is going through that, the ITE Roundabout community page is a great place to go. There's a lot of us on there that have had experience walking through this dozens of times, if not more, and we can be a great resource for you to help get you the answers and the videos and the materials that you need to help get them on your side. But moving on to the next question. Do you find that vehicles will ignore the central island if it is not raised curb as opposed to the flush central island?
So at Textile Road, in a roundabout way, the answer is some do. Backing up to that 2015 roundabout that I built, the first one, Textile Road, it was a flush island. The reason why it was flush was I wanted to make it just like a UK model. My maintenance guys loved it. They said, man, I can take my plow. In Michigan, the plow is underneath the truck, as you saw. It's not out in front. They love it. I'd say 85% of the drivers, give or take, go around it. 15% don't. It's kind of like speed limits. And what I found is, I'll call them the nervous Nellies, off peak hour, they'll see someone make a direct left over that thing, and they call me up, and they get concerned. I'll say that nicely. They're very concerned. And I have to tell them, really, I understand, but it's not as problematic as you think it is. Ultimately, I just decided, you know what, I can have it both ways. I can raise it 3 inches. I can still get that farm equipment and trucks to go over it, but still discourage this. So the answer is yes, some do, but it dramatically goes down once you raise it 2 to 3 inches, and it's still not enough for the drivers to not be able to drive over it. I'll just leave it at that. Truck drivers, excuse me.
I think that's a good clarification, Mark, so thanks for that. The next question was, what was the AADT threshold for the mini roundabout mentioned earlier? I think that was Textile.
15,000 is what Wei Zhang told me from Federal Highway. If you look him up, he is the mini roundabout guru for Federal Highway. Excellent, resourceful, smart. He knows what he's talking about, and I put all in my faith in Wei, and it paid off in aces. So I'm very thankful to him.
Okay. The next question, there's not a lot of deflection on the entry here. Has there been any issues with that?
Well, from the crash data, no. We had 7 crashes at this site so far. 6 of them are PDO. I did have one driver that drove through there that was drunk. They were over the limit, legal limit. And there was a B and an A crash there, injury. Would the deflection help? No one knows, but I know this much. If the stop sign was still there, it could have been a heck of a lot worse. This is a case where you're balancing you're making trade-offs. You know, when someone says, what's your ideal roundabout size, 100 to 110, you can get that bigger deflection in there, a little bit more robust. I am not seeing a problem at this intersection to the point where I say, yeah, you know what, we didn't hit it on this one. More is better, it always is, but you have to realize that sometimes we just don't have the budgets to do what we would like to do, and sometimes it's good enough. So that's what I'm finding so far. And
Mark, can I add to that? I think what Mark did on this was he did some other less costly or less expensive options, which were the optical speed bars, which was another question. What are those? The optical speed bars. Could you have an aerial, Mark, that you can tab back to that shows those?
So ultimately, they're the 12 by 18 dots, boxes. So you can see,
there we go.
Oh, my cursor, you see my cursor there. These are the optical speed bars. I have intention, so I'm going to experiment this year. I'm going to put sometime this spring/fall. One of the things that people do remark on Facebook is people don't see the 15-mile-per-hour speed plaque sign underneath the roundabout ahead sign. I'm going to put a pavement marking, special pavement marking that you kind of see with the interstate shield to get people in the right lane. I'm going to make that plaque in yellow and black, 15 miles an hour in advance, and see how that works. Does that grab people's attention? I also want to make those optical speed bars bigger and see what kind of effect that has on it. From there, we did consider going into this thing. You can always put speed humps for race crosswalks for some areas. I do not have any pedestrian traffic here, but some type of physical feature, if the drainage works, to slow that traffic down. That's something we're going to consider in the future if we're finding things to be problematic. But right now, it's fallen in the projections of that 12 to 15 to the point where I'm not seeing the need right now without the injuries. So, but that's something you can also take into consideration if you want to really, if you don't have a lot of deflection, put in those raised crosswalks or speed humps, whatever you want to call them.
Thank you, Mark. The next question is, did you close Bemis and Moon to all traffic for 2 months, and what types of detours were available?
Yeah, that's a good question. I neglected to say that. Thank you, whoever asked that question. Yes, in Washtenaw County, we tell people we want the suffrage to be expedited, be done, be gone. And so this would have taken twice as long. Most roundabouts take twice as long if you build them under part width. It just gets very problematic, and people go, you can only have one-way traffic, and even then, if it gets costly. I didn't have the budget to put any type of temporary signals up. So the detour route was, from memory, 5 miles. It was an unofficial detour route, which is a half mile away from this intersection that everyone used, but the official posted route was about 5 miles in length. So that's a very good question. Thank you, whoever asked that.
Okay, next question. Is there any reason not to use the Shark's Teeth yield line instead of a dashed line across the entrance to the roundabout?
Other than my traffic and safety folks won't do it, no. They have their ways and what they want, and I don't fight it. So I'm lucky that I got the curved arrows. That was a major fight I had to get. So.
And the Shark's Teeth, I guess the Shark's Teeth is an optional marking that's in the MUTCD that you can put in, and those dash markings are really not a yield line. They're more of the projected circulatory road line, right? And then we just use the yield pavement marking.
Yeah, I do what traffic and safety tells me to do, so we're good.
Okay, and then this question, that's perfect entry to this question. You mentioned the arrows. What led you to use the UK style arrow instead of a through left combination arrow as suggested by the MUTCD?
I thought it was cool. I thought it was unique. Mini roundabouts are not really in the guide, and I felt like, hey, this is a perfect opportunity to set the trend for mini roundabouts. So I thought it made sense.
The next question, we got the same There's the same question on the deflection. There's a second part. Have you noticed any issues with vehicles slowing appropriately to enter the roundabout? I think you already asked that one.
I mean, it ultimately, it's self-regulating during peak hours of the day. Off peak for any roundabout, you're still going to get some people come in hot. But that's where the sight distance comes into play. Provide that sight distance, and ultimately they will have the appropriate distance that they need to be able to decelerate and yield to traffic in order to prevent PDO crash. Ultimately, no, I'm not seeing a problematic issue. To answer the question directly, no, I'm not seeing anything that concerns me.
Okay, and then there's two questions by two different people, but they're both on bikes, so I'll just read them both to you. Were pedestrians and bikes considered, and the second part of the question is, have bicycle facilities been included in any of your mini roundabouts?
Bikes, no. Peds, yes. In Dexter, we do have a ped crossing, so you got to make sure that your islands, in this case, this would not be a good design for pedestrian refuge. But I had more right-of-way to deal with in the location in Dexter. So that's something you want to take into consideration when you're doing your splitter islands, when you have ped crossings. I don't have any here. I am a bike rider. I ride my bike often. And the biggest thing I like to tell people is you need to take command in that lane. You need to get in the middle of that lane, take command, and stay in the center of that lane when you're circulating. And don't hang out on the outer edges to allow cars to overpass you, because that's when things can go bad. That's just reality. In a case like this where there's not any type of widened shoulder, so to speak, for well, there is to the north, but to the other legs there's not. Put some type of feature like a Dutch thing for this. A, I didn't have the budget, but B, just doesn't make sense. People that ride their bikes out in these parts of the world, they're within inches of cars driving by at 50, 55 miles an hour. That's just a reality. So when you approach this intersection, any roundabout, get in the middle of your lane and command respect.
Great. And on a similar topic, have sidewalks and crosswalks been installed on any of the other mini roundabouts?
Yes, the one in Dexter has. That ICD is 100.
Wonderful. What width did you use on the circulatory roadway?
About 20 feet.
Okay. What speeds do you try to achieve? What entry speeds do you try to achieve?
Well, realistically, can you go through this thing faster than 15? Yes, you can. But we post it for 15. You could go through this thing at 25 if absolutely no one were present. But ultimately, the onus is on the driver to yield and give them enough sight distance. They're approaching it. We've got it well lit at night. We don't have a nighttime problem here. But keep that in mind when you're designing these things, because you don't want that to be a big surprise to a driver in the middle of the night that they don't see this. One thing that's not out here yet, but I'm going to enhance it even more. The temperature got too cold on me as I put reflectors in the splitter islands, so that light reflects outlines it even better than the tubes. So I have the tubes and I got the reflectors. So that's a feature that's coming that was supposed to be done last fall, but it just got too cold too fast, and I wasn't able to put the epoxy down for it to work. So that's something else I do at all my roundabouts, and it really enhances it very well at nighttime.
Wonderful. Are any of the planned roundabouts incorporate, the same question is about sidewalks. Are all of these locations essentially rural locations without
Suburban.
sidewalks? Okay.
Suburban, yeah, with the exception of the one in Dexter. It's not that, it just happens to be that we're tackling those suburban ones where there's not a lot of any type of pedestrian activities yet. When that day comes, right away is going to need to be purchased anyways for either a multi-use path or a sidewalk, and we can retrofit as we need to at that point. If you know something's coming down the pike, obviously planning wise, it's good to incorporate it then, but for something like out here, it didn't make any sense to incorporate that into this particular design that may never come to fruition or be decades away.
Right. And then one question was, can you clarify the crashes again? 12 to 15 per year post roundabout, and then what was the prior crash history?
Yeah, so each intersection was different. We're getting on average 12 to 15 PDO crashes, one a month, give or take, 1.3 if you want to call it, per month at these intersections. They're fender benders where people are walking away and they're paying a deductible to their insurance company to get their car fixed. That's ultimately what's happening out there. So, you know, that may be too much for someone to bear. Now, what were we having before then? Probably in the realm of anywhere from 4 to 7. But in those areas, like in this particular case, we had a fatality. So, you know, you are getting your PDOs, but you're also getting your C's and your B's too. So, you know, and they're random. You never know when you're going to get them. So when you look statistically at the crashes, you are going to have a spike in crash. And the hardest thing you're going to have to come up with is people like to throw the word danger out there. Is it dangerous? I say it's not dangerous because people aren't getting hurt, but the perception is it is dangerous. Here through Washtenaw County, people pretty much understood they're not dangerous. You just have to pay attention. You have to make sure you're yielding correctly. Have your patience to wait for that gap. And remember the trade-offs. You know, you've got we're still getting PDOs for the most part, and the level of service on day one is remarkable compared to what it was, and the shrinking budget. So when you factor it all in together, it's just one of those realities that, you know, we felt is a fair trade-off to make.
All right. How many days to construct each roundabout?
You can count on minimum 5 weeks, no less. If you use this type of a design for curb and gutter, if you have a lot of it really depends on your underdrain, your how much pipe you put in the ground. The more pipe you have, the more utilities. I have my utilities that are done before construction starts. So that's not a way, at least if it should be done. There's no surprises, but I would say 4 or 5 weeks minimum. Just count on it because you got to have your curb to set. You got to cut your grades. You need staging as far as getting your paver out there. Could you do it in theory sooner? Yeah, but you're also going to pay a premium for that too. Keep in mind. I want it cheap. I want it fast. I want it good. Pick two. Kind of the analogy it goes. You can't have it all. Have all three all the time. So. It's one of those things where you can put more research, you can have more labor, more equipment, but you know, keep in mind you also have a small footprint. And there's only so much iron that can go in that one area at a time. So I stand by that. 4 to 5 weeks.
All right. And what design vehicle did you use?
School bus.
It's the 45 foot, or do you know?
Yeah, it's about a wheelbase of 40.
Okay. And then any of the planned roundabouts incorporate sidewalks in the design? There's a lot of questions about sidewalks.
Yeah, we got a lot of people in urban areas, which is great. That's awesome. You know, really what sidewalks means is you just need more right-of-way on your corners, and you need more wider splitter islands, you know, if you want to use that refuge. But again, if you think about it from a 140 to 100, and many of those urban areas, you're probably going to have speed limits of 35, 25 miles an hour in that range potentially. And then you can throw in raised crosswalks to help with elevating the pedestrian crossing the roadway, but also slowing traffic down, entering into the roundabout. It can all be done, and it can be done substantially cheaper than a traditional intersection. So I don't want to discourage anyone that's in a city saying that this isn't for me. Although we do build these technically in more suburban rural areas, this application can and will work in an urban environment. You know, right away is right away. It's still going to cost you, but if you have less square footage and less impacts, it's not going to cost you as much, and you might be you're going to right size it anyways for your needs. So don't be discouraged about what you see on my screen as far as rural.
Great. And then this is a longer question. You say that mini roundabouts break over 15,000 vehicles per day. La Jolla Boulevard.
Wei Zhang does, so let's clarify that. But okay, go ahead.
La Jolla Boulevard in San Diego is a 2-lane corridor with 5 consecutive mini roundabouts and sustains 22 to 23,000 vehicles per day. I think sustainable volume is more nuanced issue than a hard limit. What do you think?
I think, well, what does your community think is really what matters. You know, if you build something and you have backups on day one, are they going to view it as a success or a waste of money? If they say, you know what, it's something we can live with based upon our budget, then do it. It's an improvement, right? But if reality is the bar has to be much higher for them to, you know, for people to keep their jobs and be happy, then no, it's not acceptable. So I guess you have to weigh it with expectations from your community to answer that question, honestly. You know, if you have backups of say 20 minutes and it's only 5 minutes to 15, you know, or 10, you know, 7 minutes, yeah, that's better. Is that good enough? I don't know. Every community is different.
Great. The next question is, do you know if the PDO accidents are from local drivers or out-of-towners? This may impact usefulness of more public education.
Mix. Both.
Okay. Have you built any multi-lane modern roundabouts? We have many AWSC intersections with 2 lanes on each approach.
Yeah, we have a 2x2. I've got 35,000 vehicles going through that thing Monday through Friday. And it is, I have on average 100 to 120 PDO crashes there every year. Failure to yield and circulating left from the outside lane when they should be exiting are the 2 predominant types of crashes that happen at that intersection. A lot of national debate as far as amongst engineers, should we continue doing 2x2s? Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think the answer is if you don't have to, don't. If you know, when you're doing your 20-year analysis for 2x2s and you find out you don't need that capacity till say year 10, year 15, year whatever, block it out. Meaning, what do I mean by that? Well, either use pylons, use temporary curb, do whatever you have to do so that it's only a 1x1 or 2x1 or whatever it is until the day you actually need it. That way your crashes will go substantially lower, because 2x2s are much more difficult from an education and navigation standpoint for people with anxiety and people that are just focused on their cell phones. Call it what it is. They shouldn't be, but they are. It just factors into the equation. The simpler you can make it, the better. That's the best that's the best advice I can give people.
Agreed. I think taking a look at not only your opening year and your design year, but your interim year is really critical to appropriate roundabout design. If your design year is saying you need a 2x2, I think it's really important to take a look at the 10-year and when that threshold is passed, and do a phased roundabout design for the full 20 years or 40 years or whatever your design life is, but do a phased approach with either permanent or temporarily permanent features in order to make sure that the roundabouts operate efficiently and effectively. Because when you don't have enough traffic going through a 2-lane, you don't get the appropriate speed reduction, and you get a lot of just your fast paths fall apart, which is where we start seeing issues with collisions and safety. So I think that, thank you for that, Mark.
No problem.
Let's see, what is your recommendation for the maximum ADT for a Mini?
I'll stick with what Wei Zhang told me, 15,000.
What software did you use to analyze the traffic at the intersections?
I'd have to refer to Mr. Lenters on that question. I'm not 100% certain. It's a good question. I just don't remember.
Is there a different standard than NCHRP 672 for entry circulatory and exit speeds for mini roundabouts shown today?
Don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. How safe is roundabouts for the pedestrian and cyclist?
It's all relative, all subjective, right? Depends on, you know, your views. So I have no fear on my bicycle. So is that right, wrong? It doesn't mean I'm complacent. It doesn't mean you know, I'm very well aware of my surroundings, but you have to have confidence on your bicycle in order to ride in traffic and high-speed traffic. That's just how I view life. You know, the resources there for dedicated bike lanes are wonderful. You know, the concept's wonderful, especially I know many people in cities are pushing in that. That's great. I encourage that. I just don't have the budget to do that kind of stuff, and I don't have the numbers to even justify it. You know, yeah, you could say if you build it, they will come, but I don't see a problem. Fortunately, here in Washtenaw, we don't have a problem with bicycles, and you know, for the most part, I shouldn't say the problems. There's always problems. We're not seeing the high crash results that we're having interflecting into, at least not to my knowledge. But that's more of a traffic and safety question. You know, when you have pedestrians, you want your street lighting. You want to be able to make them be seen. So the idea of a raised crosswalk is a good idea from my perception. You know, perspective, excuse me. You know, you're going to have to get your snowplow drivers on board with that, because some of them don't like the concept of those in primary roadways. Those are for subdivisions. Those aren't for primary roadways. And that's kind of the things I know planners and engineers kind of butt heads against as far as what we want versus, you know, what we're building. Ultimately, if you have pedestrians and you got facilities out there, build them into the equation, factor in their needs to the point where they are safe. Now, what do I mean by safe? You know, ultimately, they have to take accountability for themselves, too, as a pedestrian. They need to make eye contact. They can't just, you know, look at their cell phone, keep their heads down, and walk into a roadway and expect them to, you know, their cars are going to stop for them. I try to teach that in education portions. You need to make eye contact with the driver. If they're not making eye contact with you, do not walk in front of that car. Rapid rectangular flashing beacons are another great idea. You can put those in. Those do really work. They're all over the city of Ann Arbor. I think they're great. They're not cheap, but if you got the volumes there to justify it, do it. I encourage it because that will enhance the situation. So there's not really a one-size-fits-all answer to, you know, questions when it comes to pedestrians and cyclists. You know, you really have to factor in the expectations of your community. Like Portland, Oregon is going to be, in Seattle, Washington is going to be completely different from, you know, say, you know, somewhere in the Midwest that's, you know, not an urban area. So you have to reflect, you know, what your community expects, demands, versus what's reality of on the ground using it, and what your budget accounts for.
Great. And there was a follow-up question to the ADT guideline. The question is there a guideline for approach volume distribution, such as 70-30% main versus minor roadway approaches?
I don't know the answer to that question. It's a fascinating question. Wei Zhang would know that. So I would encourage whoever asked that, look up Wei Zhang on the internet, and if let me put it this way, if he doesn't know it, there is no answer.
What are the calculated entry and departure speeds where the crosswalks would be?
I don't have that scenario, so I can't answer that question.
Here's another one about snow. We receive a lot of snow. We measure in feet, not inches. Do you have issues with not having a raised island? People not seeing that this is a roundabout when the middle is buried?
No, I have not had that. The mini roundabout that I have that's flat, no, not been problematic. And wherever you are, if you're in Buffalo or someplace around there, or in the mountains. Flatter, they love, my maintenance guys love it. So really the bottom line is can you deal with those 15% of phone calls out there when they see someone making a direct left, probably off-peak hours, and they're saying how unsafe it's going to be? You know, are you willing to, you know, take that phone call? That's really what it boils down to.
What are the lane widths for the approaches and the exits?
Curveball. Fortunately, I have my plans over my shoulder here.
While you're looking that one up.
One moment. Yeah.
Another question is, can police ticket those who cut through the flat circle, who cut through the central island?
Ours do. Is it right? I don't know. That's for a magistrate to figure out. I didn't go to law school. They're roughly 14 feet.
Okay.
In the curb area.
Can you play the snowplow video again?
Sure.
And what is the, while you have your plans out, what is the width of your splitter island?
They're anywhere from 2 to 5 feet.
And while this is playing, can you touch on the sight distance approach, and is that for the 15 to 20 mile an hour design speed?
Yes, the answer is yeah. For these mini roundabouts, what I've been taught is you go back 15 feet from each yield line, and if you can see from point to point, you've achieved minimum acceptable sight distance for a UK mini style roundabout. And again, AASHTO really doesn't touch up on an all-way yield control intersection. So we had to use what guidance we could. And we felt like, you know, well, they're all over the UK and they're no dummies over there. So if it works for them, I think it's going to work for us. And it so far, so good. You know, they were the pioneers of minis. More could be better. You don't want too much more, because if you know, I've kind of found that if you give them too much sight distance, they become complacent and they try to make decisions too far out in advance and then make mistakes. So you want to be within that sweet spot. Obviously, you know, if you have 100, it's great, but 50 is the absolute minimum.
And then regarding the collisions, again, so you had 15 PDO crashes in the Mini. Do you have 12
to 15 on average a year, and every year is different. So, yeah.
Do you have a comparison for a single lane larger roundabout in the county?
It's a good question. Probably in the realm of 8 to 10.
Okay. There is another question as why Way uses the 1,500 vehicles per day as an upper limit. That would be a question, I think, for him.
He's the expert.
Right.
I trust.
And then, do you know how effective the pavement markings on the approaches and addressing the approach speeds were?
I think the optical speed bars look great on paper, but they're not big enough in the field. And I want to experiment with making them bigger and making them a little bit more robust this spring when I do the 15 mile per hour speed plaque sign. It's not official yet. I got to get the right people to say that, so I shouldn't make it sound like it's going to happen. But chances are it's going to. But that's something I'd like to make, given a chance to do it over again. You know, it meets the guidelines. It makes, 12 by 18 is what it says in the manual, but I think bigger could be better. I think it could have a slightly better effect. That's just my observation. I have no science behind that. That's just me and my eyeballs in my 20 years just telling me that.
We had one question that asked, can you put stop sign markings in a roundabout rather than a yield sign? Yield markings, the answer is no. The roundabouts are designed to be yield controlled, and the stop sign would defeat the purpose of the yield, and it would impact the operations and just wouldn't be a an advisable move. We even advise during staging, once you move to a roundabout configuration, you should be in yield control and not confuse drivers with doing a stop control, even in a temporary situation during construction, unless it's absolutely needed for some reason. The 4 to 5 weeks to install the roundabout, was that partially open or closed? And have you tried building one side at a time, keeping one direction of traffic open during construction?
That was closed. I built my 2x2 in 2013 under half width, and it took from March to October. So you're doubling the cost, you're doubling the time, you're doubling the headaches. You know, and sometimes politically that's what it takes. I get it, guys, and especially in an urban environment. Your mayor says you are not closing this intersection. Your fire chief says you're not closing this intersection. And that's what the case was, why I had to build part width with my 2x2. But for the most part, whenever we can go closure, expedite the pain, so to speak, get in, get out, get the blessing of the fire chief, we do.
And then this is just a follow-up to your comment on the capacity. We need more minis so we have more capacity data. The capacity models just aren't there yet for minis, which I would agree with. And then someone chimed in, Mark, thank you, Mark Lenters and Bill Wilkinson. They chimed in and said Arcady was used.
Okay, if they say so, I'll buy that for $1.
And then, do you have any numbers on the maintenance and upkeep costs for your installation sites, either per year versus stop or signalized control?
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, you know, here's the realities. The smaller they are, signs getting knocked down. I've got one yield that got knocked down. I have one keep right sign got knocked down, and since we opened in November, so that's a cost. You know, your snow plowing is your snow plowing. I mean, that's kind of negligible. It's frankly shouldn't matter. The street light got hit once clipped by a truck turning right. Again, it's built into my cost for my annual maintenance. Not to say that, you know, Detroit Edison might come back some year and say, hey, we're going to increase the price. But for now, it's, you know, your energy cost, which and I don't know how much we're paying on that. That's traffic and safety pays that bill, so I frankly don't know that, but I should, but I don't. But the signs, keep that in mind that they will get knocked down occasionally.
How was stormwater handled? I believe you addressed that in some of your questions, but did you want to elaborate on that, or in some of your
like that. So you can see in yellow. So the upper right corner there, the water goes on that north leg from north to south. On the west side, it turns the corner and goes west. But on the east leg, it comes in towards the intersection. It had no place to go, so that's why I have an inlet. I captured it coming across the roadway with the culvert to the north, and I built an inlet in the curb radius there to account for water in the roadway to capture that. And my outlet was to the south. That's where there's a county drain, and that's where the water heads. And then I have on the you might ask, how's the water get off? In other areas, I have spillways on the ends of the curb and gutter on the low sides. High sides, I don't need them.
Right. At what ICD do you eliminate landscape in the center island?
Well, for minis, you can't have landscaping because you need that area for truck traffic. In order in farm equipment to make those direct left. We have an ICD of 100 in Dexter, and it has a small envelope, say about a radius of 5 feet that Dexter was able to use. We did turning radiuses on. I don't know. I mean, every intersection is unique. There's not a cookie cutter response to that. It all depends on the angles that you're coming in and coming out at. But, you know, do a turning movement template, create envelopes, and if you have an area that you could use for enhancement, great, do it. Knock yourself out under permit, or you know, with anyone that wants to be able to build it in and incorporate it. But take a look at where your trucks turn, make sure that they're provided, and if you have any free real estate, great.
And to add on to that, per FHWA, a mini roundabout should not exceed 90 feet. Anything above 90 feet, generally your truck turning templates can navigate around a central island. So I
was told they're called compact urbans.
Yeah.
From that, well, that's what those are. They're 100-foot ICD, so the islands are bigger and they have more of an envelope to put something in the center. So I have all my true 90s and below. You wouldn't be able to have that space.
Right, exactly. Well, Mark, we do have a few more questions, but we only have 2 more minutes. So I will provide the questions to you, and then we'll answer some of the ones that we were not able to answer here on this call, and post the responses on the ITE Roundabout community page.
Great. There's my email address. You know, got questions about, I'm not a design expert. I use other people like Lindsay, you know, of the world, to do that for me. I am, you know, knowledgeable about construction and operation, but I do rely upon people that do this for a living day in and day out to design my footprints. So I might not have those answers. I might have to refer you to, you know, consultants. But if you have any other questions on education, for sure, and any outcomes, feel free to send me an email.
Thank you very much. And I am sharing the wrong screen, but here you go. That's a beautiful roundabout that we worked on. But this is my contact information. If you have an affordable roundabout that you would like to present, please contact me, send me an email, give me a call, and we can get you set up and featured on our next webinar. So thank you very much to everyone who stuck with us this whole time, who attended, and who submitted your questions. We will submit the recording as soon as it's available to our ITE community page as well. Phil, did you want to add anything on before we close out?
No, I'm good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the invitation, and it was a pleasure being able to speak to your audience today.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Mark, for your time. We really appreciate it.
No problem.
Lisa, can you download the questions?
Yes, I should be able to download the question pod, and I will stop the recording right now. So thank you, everybody, for your participation, and thanks for coordinating this from all the staff from the Roundabout Task Force. We appreciate it.